morning and welcome to Rising. Thank you so much for tuning in on this Tuesday morning that feels like it's at least a Wednesday morning, but we have not.
Moving weird.
Time is moving weird, man. What is even going on? Well, we've got a great show to get to today. As world leaders gather in New York City to attend the UN General Assembly, President Joe Biden is taking center stage and addressing the global community. In many ways, this is his swan song, as foreign policy and international affairs were always his passion and, according to him, his forte. When he took office in 2021, he spoke at the State Department and said, "America is back." Since taking office, one could say the world is in far worse shape. Gaza and Israel, Ukraine and Russia, the Sudan, these are among the top crises all around the globe. Biden has acknowledged that there are a lot of challenges and said things can get better. Let's watch.
I recognize the challenges from Ukraine to Gaza to Sudan and beyond. War, hunger, terrorism, brutality, record displacement of people, a climate crisis, democracy at risk, strains within our societies, the promise of artificial intelligence and its significant risk. The list goes on. But maybe because all I've seen and all we have done together over the decades, I have hope. I know there is a way forward.
The war in Gaza is approaching a grim milestone of 1 year, despite hours, days, and months of U.S. diplomats and diplomacy trying to get Hamas and Israel to lay down their arms. The fight has become more entrenched. Biden addressed this conflict. Let's watch here.
We're also working to bring greater measure of peace and stability to the Middle East. The world must not flinch from the horrors of October 7th. Any country would have the right and responsibility to ensure that such an attack can never happen again. Thousands of armed Hamas terrorists invaded a sovereign state, slaughtering and massacring more than 1,200 people, including 46 Americans, in their homes and at a music festival. Despicable acts of sexual violence, 250 innocents taken hostage. I've met with the families of those hostages. I've grieved with them. They're going through hell. Innocent civilians in Gaza are also going through hell. Thousands and thousands killed, including aid workers. Too many families dislocated, crowding into tents, facing a dire humanitarian situation. They did not ask for this war that Hamas started. I put forward with Qatar and Egypt a ceasefire and hostage deal. It's been endorsed by the UN Security Council. Now is the time for the parties to finalize its terms.
Meanwhile, the war in Lebanon is widening. Israel has been launching strikes against Hezbollah, leaving hundreds dead. Scenes of people fleeing the south, considered a Hezbollah stronghold, for the north are eerily reminiscent. In a more surprising moment, though, Biden looked back at his failure in Afghanistan and reflected on that. Let's watch.
It was a decision accompanied by tragedy. 13 brave Americans lost their lives, along with hundreds of Afghans, in a suicide bomb. I think those lost lives, I think of them every day. I think of all the 2,461 U.S. military deaths over a long 20 years of that war.
Biden also addressed his decision to drop out of the presidential race, saying, quote, "I decided after 50 years of public service, it's time for a new generation of leadership to take my nation forward. My fellow leaders, let us never forget some things are more important than staying in power."
So Biden going over kind of the state of the world and how he feels about things. Let's talk specifically about the Israel part there. He, talked about the horror of what happened, which I think it's appropriate to do. His peace plan has not been agreed to by Israel and Hamas, so there's no peace. The U.S. is committed to, under his administration, supporting Israel, even in the event that they are engaged in certain aspects of their war that we clearly say we do not agree with. We definitely don't agree with what's happening on the West Bank. And we have said, don't go into Rafah. We've drawn so many lines that they've exceeded, and nothing has changed. I don't think Israel's leadership cares what Joe Biden thinks. And so, it's a little, I don't know what that says about him as an effective political leader or world leader on the global stage, that we can't get this key ally to do any of the things we've said, we support you, we love you, we're with you, but don't start World War III, don't do this, this is escalating, we don't like this, we don't like the way this looks. They don't care at all. So what does that say about Joe Biden's abilities as a diplomat?
I think it says a lot about Netanyahu specifically, because this is a Netanyahu decision, not all of the Israelis. Barely any Israelis agree with Netanyahu.
Right. Although they do agree with continuing the war. They don't agree with Netanyahu, but they would keep a lot of the policies in place.
People want them to pull out of. There are plenty of folks who want him to pull out of Gaza.
They blame him for what happened.
They blame him, as they should. I mean, he propped up Hamas, if we go back in history and look at that. And there's been a tense relationship between Netanyahu and Joe Biden for years. They don't necessarily like each other, although Joe Biden is incredibly supportive of Israel and has been throughout his history. What's interesting to me right now is, as everything is happening with Lebanon and as Israel put forward that mission to blow up Hezbollah's members of leaderships, their pagers and walkie-talkies, they knew that would also, I mean, there have been rocket launches going back and forth, but that was a long plan. They knew very well that was going to ignite more pushback from Hezbollah and, of course, in Israel. Now, in some ways, it's been effective in that they targeted very important leaders. But on the other hand, it's also made a case saying, yeah, U.S., you have to keep supplying us with weapons, because not only are we doing what the U.S. does not agree with in Gaza and in Palestine right now, but now they have to fend off Hezbollah.
Yeah, and it's just, if we don't agree with it, I don't know why we're continuing to fund it. I mean, I think a lot of the American people would take the position. I include myself in this category, and I never want to pretend that what I think just happens to magically be popular, because I'm sure I hold many policy views that are not popular. This one I suspect is probably popular, that most Americans would say Israel got attacked, they have the right to respond to that. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Hamas is not good for the Palestinian people. And you know what? Any country attacked like that was going to respond. But is it our business? Not necessarily. Is it the American taxpayers' business? No. Is being involved there making us safer? Clearly not, because terrorists who target Americans blame us for what Israel is doing in the Middle East. It gets us into more trouble. And past administrations, while supporting Israel, including Republican administrations, have pushed back at times to say, okay, that's enough, no more. Yeah. There's going to be a broader war because of this. You've responded, and now the response has gone on long enough, and now we have to have diplomacy and peace. And if Biden is doing that behind closed doors, it's not working. I don't know that he's doing it. Maybe he says he's doing it, but it's not working. It's not working where past American presidents, including Reagan and George H.W. Bush, were able to get Israel to do what the administration's policy is, and Joe Biden is not able to do that.
Well, he's dealing with Netanyahu. Netanyahu is not listening to anybody. He's not listening to his own advisors. The only advisor that he's reportedly listening to right now is his son, who is an extremist. And he's lost advisors, he's pushed them out. He is, much like so many other autocrats, he's decided to use his country as a weapon and a protection shield this war as a protection shield for him not to leave office, because let's not forget, he was convicted of corruption. I mean, this is a country that does not support its leader right now, and he is doing everything, all means necessary, to protect himself. With that being said, you're right. America has been able to pressure back and on both administrations. Right. We also have lobbyists who are pushing internally for us not to do so. And that is where Joe Biden, I will give him credit, is that he has been aggressively pushing back. And Antony Blinken talks about it all the time in his press conferences in the State Department. And we don't really pay enough attention to that, but that's nuance. And the American people don't sit and watch press conferences from the State Department every day. They see the headlines. They see that there have been 40,000 casualties in Gaza. They see that the hostages have not been coming home. And they see the escalation in the Mideast and are worried. And now, because it's not just Israel, as it's never been, it's never just a conflict between Israel and Palestine. It has always been a conflict, a geopolitical conflict between many world powers, even more so right now. And that's probably why, in my opinion, Joe Biden isn't pulling back.
I would just get out of it. I want to be not involved in it. I don't think we've helped the situation. I don't think the Middle East has benefited from our involvement. I don't think we've benefited. I think so many Americans look and say, what's the point? Israel has a lower debt to GDP ratio than the U.S. does. Why are American tax dollars being spent in any other nation's defense when we have crumbling infrastructure in places? We have so many problems at home to address. And this is not addressing a problem that we have. In fact, it's exacerbating a problem that we have in terms of terrorists wanting to target a U.S. service member coming under attack. We had a quasi base attacked someone killed. We have our forces coming under attack. I mean, now I would also withdraw those forces from the bases. We have them in Africa and other places because then when we get attacked, we feel, rightly so, a duty to respond and to fight back. But we could just not be in those dangerous situations by having a more restrained foreign policy that accords with what the American people in both parties want and never seem to get.
I think Americans want stable democracy, and there's a risk right now in that if we pull out our support of Israel, that the region will be even more destabilized, and Israel doesn't have allies immediately in front of them that are really supporting them. I mean, of course, there are Western democracies, and Egypt is staying out, and Jordan's staying out, but fundamentally, at the end of the day, this is an Iran situation in which they're calling on their support networks to attack Israel, and the United States has a foreign policy agreement with Israel. Right. It's not, do I like this strategy? No. Do I approve of Netanyahu? No. But do I think that Israel has a right to exist? Yes. And I think most Americans do as well.
Yes. And behind closed doors, the leaders of all these countries want peace with Israel.
Right.
But it's the people are outraged by what has happened to the Palestinians, which is understandable. They're being massacred. It's terrible. The Palestinian question is a difficult one to solve, and no one is happy about what's going on. But behind closed doors, the leaders all want peace with Israel. They don't want war. And it would be nice if cooler heads can prevail. And Netanyahu, I agree with you, has all the wrong incentives and should just resign he presided over this massive security failure. We should toss out all of our leaders more routinely when they screw up things this badly.
And I don't think there's going to be a ceasefire in the near future because of this escalation with Lebanon now and Hezbollah.
Yeah, I mean, Israel takes the position there can't be a ceasefire until Hamas is defeated or its leadership resigns, and they're not going to resign, so the war will continue. But more Rising right after this.